class buffs and class nerfs. Every morning that we wake up, this shit is hitting the fan. Every morning they've dropped hotfixes in terms of, what was it, DKs just got one, Mages got one, Elemental Shamans got slammed this morning. Let's see where all of this currently stands. I'll make sure to update some of these things as we go through this video, because some of this is probably already out of date. But here it is, 11.0.5, which specs got the most out of the update? Here we go.
Okay, patch 11.0.5 is finally here, and as always, the big question is, did I just get buffed, or did I just take a nerf? This patch, we got some big class changes to every single class in the War Within, and today, we're diving into the hard crunch of numbers by some of the best of the best. The authors of every single class guide have gathered up some information for us on exactly how much each spec improved or nerfed through theory crafting and simming. Of course,
honestly, as far as 0.5 patches go, this is the most class rebalancing I think I've ever seen in a 0.5 patch.
The PTR over the last couple of weeks,
just
so
continually
might be
ongoing.
subject to change within the first couple of resets, but without wasting any more time, let's jump right into it. Additionally, we did just launch our second channel, and we're closing in on 200 subscribers. If you're interested in more news or documentary-based content around the gaming industry as a whole, check out the link in the description below. I promise you won't be disappointed. Thanks for showing some love. Appreciate it. Starting off first, we have the Death Knight, where overall things have looked very good for this class in the War Within so far. We're going to say up front that Unholy isn't getting changed at all, which isn't necessarily a bad thing considering that they are above average in both Mythic Plus and Raid. So for overall...
But Frost got buffed, and Frost's already freaking great.
Oh, they're going to be winning.
I'm sure we'll
when it comes to Blood Death Knight, however, they have been dominating inside of raids throughout the expansion so far and have been very popular. They are getting some nerfs to Sand Lane Hero Talent Tree, which is...
we also got nerfed on, what's it called, Reaper's Mark just yesterday morning, 22% nerf on that. So, but it's still good. It's still good.
Gonna nerf them a bit, but that shouldn't be too big of a deal considering that Deathbringer has been meta this entire time. In general, you're getting some very slight decrease in DPS to AoE with Deathbringer, but your single target DPS is increasing by roughly 5%. Considering all this and the state in which Blood is right now, and how they aren't getting nerfed, overall this is a big win for Blood DK, and they're looking great heading into the new patch. Lastly, we have the star of the show, the Frost Death Knight. Now, as a spec that is currently amongst the best of the best for both raiding and Mythic Plus, with both a high pick rate and overall clear rate, it's very apparent to everybody that Frost Death Knight is dominating right now, with quite the changes coming to Deathbringer, including some new talents and adjustments.
Yeah, they're even higher than this now. They're just pumping.
Ends up being an overall buff to them by 8%. It's actually incredibly shocking that this is the case, because of how well they're performing right now. So it seems like they're looking to dominate into the near future. Overall, Death Knight is fantastic, and things are looking up for them heading into the patch today. Moving on next, we have the Demon Hunter, and when it comes to the class, we're going to make it short and sweet. They're really not getting any changes. When it comes to Havoc, they're quite simply just middle of the pack for both Mythic Plus and Raiding right now, and the fact that they aren't getting any changes isn't going to update this in any way, so it's likely they're going to just stay neutral. When it comes to Vengeance Demon Hunter, they have been performing exceptionally well in Mythic Plus environment, as they are one of the best tanks in the game. But once again, in a raiding environment, they seem to lag behind.
The sheer speed that a Vengeance Demon Hunter can run through a Mythic Plus is just so much faster than any other tank. They just fly through shit.
Some of the other tanks, such as Blood Death Knight, Guardian Druid, and of course, Protection Warrior. Overall, Demon Hunter is going to pretty much stay exactly where they're at, and they're going to be neutral heading into the patch. Moving on now to some of the bigger class changes, we have the Druid. We are going to say up front that Feral and Guardian haven't received any changes. When it comes to Guardian Druid, they honestly have been performing really well this expansion, particularly in Mythic Plus, by being one of the better tanks in the game. They've generally just been a very safe class across the board when it comes to damage mitigation, self-sustain, utility, that sort of thing. So
yeah, just keep swiping at everything.
Is an overall win for them. For Feral Druid, however, it looks like they're continuing to lag behind in all forms of content.
So Feral got a big buff this morning. He's saying they're a bit nerfed. This completely flipped on its head this morning. This morning, patch notes came out. They're getting like 20% buffs across the board to almost, a bunch of their abilities. So they should be doing much better after today's patch.
The Mythic Plus are below average and one of the worst DPS in the game. And to add on to that, they're struggling and just about middle of the pack when it comes to raiding. With them receiving no changes overall heading into 11.0.5, I gotta say, this is definitely a loss, which sadly makes me believe that they need some changes in the upcoming
Yeah, they got
weeks.
them this morning.
First up with the changes when it comes to Restoration Druid, you have to know over the last couple weeks they have received roughly a 15 to 20% increase in throughput of healing, which has raised their healing per second overall drastically in a raiding environment. The problem still occurs when you head into Mythic Plus, and they're still amongst the worst in the game when it comes to that. It seems like they got a bunch of changes on paper with this patch, but a few new talents were added, and they even nerfed an old one, but only one of these overall is a very clear-cut upgrade, and you're likely going to feel very similar in power as you did last week. The problem still remains that Druid overall has an awful class talent tree, and Restoration Druid in particular has little to no flexibility when it comes to their healing talents. I will say overall, heading into the new patch, Restoration Druid is winning due to the last couple weeks of them getting buffed. The star of the show when it comes to changes for Druid has to be about balance. They've changed a nice amount of things for their talent tree. When it comes to Mythic Plus, you will actually see some balanced Druid, you know, pick quite often.
I saw a bunch of changes to balanced Druid. We talked about them. I think they're just trying to make them really viable. Again, I feel like I haven't been seeing a lot of boomkins, and now I'm seeing them again.
As they are surprisingly performing quite well. The issue really comes in with their single target damage, where they severely lack if you don't have, you know, your entire spec and catered around that. And they are behind most classes in the game. I also will say up front that these changes don't solve their issues like, you know, having a lack of mobility while casting, very low damage and, you know, defensive mitigation in Mythic Plus, and just awful class talent tree overall, and how I truly think they need a rework similar to how they did with Paladin. Some of these updates are a buff for sure, but in general, not loving the changes for balance, and I think they need more. For Evoker, they are another class that isn't getting any class changes. When we're talking about augmentation, they're definitely not dominating like how they were back in Dragonflight, where they were just mandatory, but that doesn't mean this class isn't good.
No,
it pretty much comes down to the fact
you
that
still got to bring at least one to raid, right? Yes, they're not, what is it, required anymore in Mythic Plus, but definitely you got to bring one to raid. It's still a good throughput in terms of what augmentation Evoker brings to the other classes.
if you can get an augmentation Evoker in your group, I mean, you're most likely going to pick them. That still hasn't changed, and that's not going to change come Tuesday. When it comes to Devastation, however, they're starting to lag behind everyone else, while everyone is acquiring more gear and tier sets. In Mythic Plus, they're amongst one of the worst classes in the game, while in a raiding environment, they're falling behind drastically into the subpar category. Don't get me wrong, they have fantastic on-demand burst damage, which is insane. It just really comes down to the fact that they lack very consistent AoE in longer duration fights. Overall, Devastation is at a loss heading into the new patch because they aren't doing well right now, and they definitely could have used some updates. On the other side of things, we do have Preservation Evoker, where of course they are still the best healer in the game to have in a raiding environment. Their wide AoE throughput is insane right now, and nothing is going to change that. And they're easily going to be amongst one of the best healers in the game to have, as they did not get nerfed. So overall, this is a very big win for them. Moving on now, we do have the Hunter.
Hunter got reworked like crazy.
Week after week, this class continues to move in the right direction.
Yeah.
The thing is that 11.0.5 brings very big updates to each of these three specs, and we're just going to say it up front. All three of them are starting to look really good. Marksmanship being...
I've seen Hunters do really good. All three of their specs are extremely viable right now. Complete reworks. What was it? Dark Ranger is like a new spec now. If you haven't tried it and you want to try it, go try it. This thing, the animations, everything about it is new. And overall, Hunters are just doing really good. But they still pull before the counter hits 0, so that's a fucking problem.
One of the top raw DPS classes you can play in the game is getting a complete rework to Dark Ranger hero talent tree that is going to make them a serious problem in all forms of content. Single target, AoE, gameplay rotation, you name it. It all got improved for Beast Mastery and Marksman, and you're getting tons of quality of life updates. For Beast Mastery, you're also getting talent updates, redesigns, pretty much everything is better for them across the board. And, you know, with how strong both of these specs have been doing right now for both raiding and somewhat Mythic Plus, except for Beast Mastery, they're looking to do even better later today when the patch goes live. Moving on now to Survival in particular, they aren't getting a complete redesign, but they are getting some slight changes to key talents such as Butchery and Fury of the Eagle, which actually lead to a nice net increase in damage. All three Hunter specs are doing great in a raiding environment, but currently, Marksmanship Hunter has been dominating in Mythic Plus, so of course they still have their problems with their defensive toolkit being absolutely horrible, but the gameplay updates and redesign should help them, and overall a very big win for Hunter. Very excited to see how you all like this spec. Nice. Moving on now to one of the better classes in the game, we have the Mage. Even if the Mage got literally nothing done to it today, it would still stay as one of the best classes.
Yeah, but it did. It got a bunch of buffs. What was it? Frost got buffed? Was it... Or then it was Frost and Arcane, but then there was recently nerfs that came into effect and it was a day before yesterday. We saw nerfs to Frost again, so there was like a balance of the rebalance. If they just stay even, if mages just stay where they currently are, they're freaking doing great. Fire was the one that really needed to be buffed a bit. That was the one that was lagging behind, and I believe what they kind of did was bring Arcane and Frost back down just a little bit to bring it more in line with what Fire can do.
To the patch, but believe it or not,
but overall,
they even got more updates that benefit them. All 3 specs are doing exceptionally well at a Mythic Plus level, and both Fire and Arcane are dominating in a rating environment at the moment. For Arcane Mage, they're getting some consistent buffs and updates to their hero talent trees, as well as, Arcane specific tree in general. They're rearranging some numbers and even adding a couple talents that really benefit them, such as Aether Vision, which will cause you to generate way more arcane charges, which then of course leads you to deal significantly more damage. It's actually crazy that I think they're buffing Arcane while there's so many specs out there that I think need...
I thought they were going to buff Frost more. I thought Frost maybe was going to get it. Like I said, Fire was being brought up slowly while the others were being brought down. But then I felt like Frost was lagging behind, and Arcane was the leader, and then Arcane got buffed. I was like, what the hell's going on? Why did they pick Arcane to buff? But I don't know. They're in love with mages lately. And then they went back and they nerfed them again just 2 days ago. So I don't know where all these guys stand now, but what I can tell you is most likely if you're playing mage, you could probably just pick between the 3 and get some good DPS.
Desperate work, and they're just not getting it. So it really proves the point that Mage is, Blizzard's love child. I will also say that they're making some changes to Fire Mage as well. Once again, they're trying to buff Living Bomb, which I think is one of the worst decisions that they're trying to make over and over, week in and week out, but it's just simply not working. In the beta, Living Bomb was fantastic. It felt amazing to use. They just nerfed it into the dirt, and it's still not going to perform well. Lastly, for Frost Mage, it looks like they're staying neutral in exactly the same spot they were in. And listen, for Mythic Plus, Frost Mage is fantastic. They're amongst one of the best in the games. But Raids, however, they're absolute hot dog water. They are not good. There's nothing going on with Frost that's going to change them. But overall, I love the Mage heading into the new patch. All 3 specs still look fantastic. They're all getting some
The good thing is they're all 3 DPS specs, so you're going to have at least one that's always good when you play Mage. So I don't feel bad.
Major buffs. So overall, a very big win for them. When it comes to Monk, however, we got Brewmaster. And listen, we're going to be brutally honest and say that the small changes that they're getting isn't going to change the state of this class. I think their defensive capability is very average at best, but their damage is, of course, among some of the best in the game. They have very low armor, low health pools, low self-healing, and stagger just isn't what
if you're a healer and you're bringing a monk into tank, prepare yourself to have your heart, fall out of your chest a couple times because their health bounces around like crazy.
Used to be. None of this is changing them drastically, which sadly leads them in a loss category because I think they needed some major updates. Another example of this is actually Windwalker, because Windwalker Monk is falling behind significantly in both Mythic Plus and rating. In all forms of content, they're just falling behind, and simply put, the changes they're getting to Blackout Kick and the Shadow Pen hero talent tree don't look to be game-breaking, and overall their damage just
coming
looks
from a
to
DK
increase by roughly...
Well, with the Death Knight, at least the Blood DK is going to heal himself. He'll be just fine. But the Monk, oh man, you got to watch out. He's very dependent on you.
In case you haven't noticed, 5% isn't going to save this class, and I think they're in need of a complete update, in my opinion, sadly making them a loser. Mistweaver Monk, however, we do have a different story. Currently, they aren't doing the best in the game, and I think that's obvious to a lot of players out there, but they are getting some nice updates, I'll say. 5 brand new talents and a brand new passive. Also, a new version of Rising Sun Kick that is AoE and has like a 25-yard cone range, which I think is awesome. Massive buffs to Crackling Jade Lightning, and overall, just some nice updates for the spec. Do I think this is gonna shoot them up to near the top and make them meta? No, I don't. But I do think these changes are a step in the right direction and definitely makes this spec a winner, in my opinion, compared to the other 2 Monk specs overall. One of the better classes in the game, we now have to talk about the Paladin. Boys. We saw some significant updates coming to 11.0.5, and while these may not be raw damage or healing updates from...
I've seen Ret Paladins go nuts in some of the raid polls recently. Man, they've been doing really good. If you're good at a Ret Paladin, I think you could pump some pretty big numbers right now.
Most of these specs, they got a complete overhaul to their class talent tree, which they desperately needed, and it greatly enhances their variety in terms of capabilities for their teammates. Over the last couple weeks, Holy Paladin has been getting nerfed, and if you combine that with the very, very minor updates coming this patch, it looks like they're overall going to be taking a 3 to 5% hit. I think this is okay, though, considering that they're one of the best in the game right now for both Mythic Plus and rating. so we're going to keep them at a neutral standpoint. For Retribution Paladin, they did receive some nerfs to key talents over the last couple of weeks, but they're buffed overall by 6% when it comes to their damage this patch.
Yeah,
so
they were already
they're going to
good.
stay neutral again, but you got to know that for Mythic Plus and rating, Retribution Paladin is dominating. They're just dominating across the board right now. They have incredible utility, consistent high on-demand burst damage. Retribution Paladin is going to
Good
do great heading
survivability
into
too.
this new patch, even though they didn't get any changes that were major. The star of the show when it comes to Paladin and the changes has to go towards protection. Protection over the last couple of weeks has shot up to the #1 DPS tank in the game, which is definitely something you could brag about. The problem is that their natural damage mitigation is just very, very low, and they get hit like trucks out of nowhere. Sometimes on my Protection Paladin, I get hit for like 6 to 8 million damage on boss fights, and it just completely one-shots me. I've had this happen to me firsthand. It's not a good feeling, and I don't think the updates to some armor, you know, with Shield of the Righteousness and some passive armor is going to solve this problem. They are, however, getting some nice updates to some cooldown reduction for abilities, as well as some damage increase once again, and healing throughput with Word of Glory. I just still, once again, think that they need more natural damage mitigation to be able to supplement for this, and this class can be one of the best tanks in the game. Overall, Paladin across the board is looking great. They're definitely a clear-cut winner heading into the new patch. Moving on now to Priest, they're pretty much just going to stay neutral here. They're getting nothing changed, so the question actually is...
I mean, priests right now, their utility is so good with their dispels that I just feel like they're viable no matter what happens to them. Obviously, Holy Priest is going to be just fine. I feel like you're always going to bring Holy Priests into your raid, again, because of their utilities and everything else. It's, I guess they're neutral right now, but I feel like there's still something you need to have.
Where does this class stand overall right now? Well, first up, Holy Priest is lagging behind in terms of Mythic Plus and rating combined. So this class not getting any updates has me worried about how they're doing overall, and it does make them a loser. Same thing pretty much goes for Shadow Priest, where they are both below average in both rating and Mythic Plus in terms of performance, and generally, they're kind of used as a utility bot to buff, heal, bring some extra mana and stuff to the party. So I do think they are a loser as well. I will say for Priest, the star of the show has to be Discipline here. They are amongst one of the best in both, you know, Mythic Plus for healing and rating, and the updates to them over the last like month or so constantly getting changed and updated. This spec is winning right now while the other two are sadly falling behind, and I'm going to be honest, it's not looking too great for Priest overall, which does leave me to leave them in the loser category. Moving on next, we do have Rogue, and listen, 11.0.5, you're actually seeing some slight improvements to all three of their specs.
Yeah, I will say, like, if you look at Rogue and where they were at the start of the expansion compared to now, I feel like they're one of the most improved. They were doing shit in the beginning. If you looked at the DPS charts, oh my god, Rogue, like all three specs were doing shit. And now they're I feel like a lot of them are very much viable. We see ass, sub titty up there.
Like more opportunities at Crack Shot for Outlaw, longer Envenom duration, a bunch of new passives for Assassination,
yeah, Outlaw
and
doing
massive
good.
overhauls for Subtlety Rogue, changing them drastically. Assassination Rogue, right off the bat, you gotta know you're still dominating heading into 11.0.5,
yeah, Assassination's
where
doing
if you
great.
add all of these changes, it's only going to buff them and make them better with how they're performing in Raid and Mythic Plus right now. They're looking like one of the better melee DPS in the entire game.
Yeah, they are.
Outlaw is kind of in a similar situation where they are only getting some, you know, quality of life updates and minor damage increases, so I think they're going to stay neutral and be just about middle of the pack in terms of throughput for both Raid and Mythic Plus. I still think that the whole crack shot gameplay needs a complete rework, and overall, I hate it. I know a lot of rogues hate it, but that's a problem for another day. Subtlety Rogue is when things start to get a little bit fishy because they're getting a pretty damn big rework to a lot of key abilities, and I'm truly unsure about how this spec is going to turn out. It is saying overall that they're getting a plus 4% to single target damage, which I guess is an upgrade, but the problem is that they're amongst one of the worst DPS specs in the game at a rating standpoint.
Damn.
So this 4% isn't going to really do jack shit for them. We don't even want to bring up the fact that, you know, Rogue and Mythic Plus for Subtlety is a waste of time, and they're amongst one of the worst specs in the game.
Wrecked.
So overall, I'm going to leave Sub at a loss because I do think they still need significant buffs toward their single target and rotation. Overall, I love Rogue. I think they're getting some nice increases to a couple of their specs. I'm really curious to see how Subtlety gets changed heading into the new patch, but right now, I'm going to leave them at a neutral standpoint. Moving on next, we do have the Shaman. Shaman is by far one of the best classes in the game, being pretty much...
We're in the age of Shaman. I keep saying that. Elemental, unbelievable. Enhancement, man, so damn good to bring to a raid. Now, he's going to talk about this a little bit.
Neck and neck with Paladin.
He's going to say they got buffed, but I know Elemental Shaman, Chain of Lightning got nerfed 50% this morning.
Them seeing significant buffs and updates across the board to all three
But it's
specs
probably still good.
was a really nice surprise. Not only that, they're getting visual updates to both Enhancement and Elemental. And finally, Ascendance's
Shaman
model is getting a brand new animation and update, which is really juicy for Shamans out there. I'm going to say up front also that this class is a very big winner. All three specs are dominating in all three
they're all
forms
very
of
good.
content. If you're a Shaman player, you've been eating really good, and it's going to continue to look that way heading into the new patch. Elemental Shaman is getting significantly more burst potential in their AoE, with their Mastery now becoming their best stat.
Yeah, that's it. The chain lightning was insane. I believe it was doing what was it, 20% damage to your chains. Now it's 10%, but still, I mean, you're gonna be fine.
And Elemental Overload's hitting like a Mack truck now. Enhancement Shaman's getting a complete overhaul to the Totemic Hero talent tree, which now makes it a serious
They were
contender
absurd
for
AoE
being
Mythic
the best
Plus,
hero
yeah.
talent tree now compared to Stormbringer, which is interesting. They're getting crucial talent updates to their tree overall, bringing them even more damage. And listen, I'm loving Shaman right now across the board for all three specs, and with them only getting buffed heading to the new patch, Shaman has my vote for being the best class in the game, which is a very big one.
I agree
Moving
with that.
on to one of the worst classes in the game now, we actually have the Warlock. I'm going to say it up front that Warlocks aren't getting any...
Shit, I mean, look, listen, Warlocks typically are in a very good spot. And the good thing about Warlocks is no matter what, someone's going to bring one to raid because you need the freaking portals, you need the ability to summon, you need those health stones and everything else. So their utility is always going to make them viable. But damn, I mean, it's been a while since I remember seeing all three Warlock specs just not being even near the top 5.
Changes. It's an absolute tragedy that Warlock isn't getting any changes because they're just simply doing bad across the board. Mythic Plus, rating,
Yeah, I thought they would've
consistent
gotten
damage,
buffed.
high on-demand burst, you name it. The Warlock is kind of having that problem. I cannot believe that classes like the Mage and Shaman are getting drastic updates
getting
and
buffed,
buffs,
and then the
while
Warlock's
Warlock
nothing.
is sitting here day in and day out, rotting away and looking like the worst overall class heading into 11.0.5.
I'm guessing somebody at Blizzard has an ex who mains a Warlock, and they just broke up, and they're like, you know what, fuck it, I'm nerfing him into the ground. Because it's insane. Look at that. All three specs in the bottom half.
No sense to me because they were dominating all throughout the beta, and this class is just falling very far from grace, which truly breaks the community's heart at this point. Warlock is in a desperate need of a change, and I don't know what the hell Blizzard is doing.
Get
And
wrecked.
for our last class, of course, we have the Warrior. Warrior is very similar to Warlock as they aren't receiving many significant changes. The difference between Warlock and Warrior, though, is that Arms is for raid, and then Fury Warrior is doing pretty good for...
Yeah, Furry Warrior, for, you know, doing your Mythic Plus and stuff like that. Not bad. Obviously, they were way better before with the AoE and everything like that. Arms Warrior was pumping that shit. Now they got nerfed.
Arms is for raid, and then Fury Warrior's doing pretty good for Mythic Plus. So overall, I'm going to put Warrior in the neutral category when it comes to their DPS specs, as they aren't...
They got
getting
nerfed before this patch, and they just stayed neutral after the patch
updates
came
or
out.
nerfs that aren't significantly going to change anything, so they're going to stay where they were. When it comes to Protection Warrior, however, I'm going to be honest, they're doing very, very good. They're amongst some of the best of the best. When it comes
They're
to
the most stable when it comes to their health pools and everything. Prot Warrior is like, if you want to heal, you want to be a healer and you don't want to have to worry too much, besides the fact that a Blood DK can heal themselves, but their health still is kind of erratic at times, Prot Warrior is the most stable. That's the old girl. You go back to her, you know, everything's going to be okay. You know, the OG tank.
the Mythic Plus and rating, and they have a very smooth damage intake, incredibly powerful defensives, and great raid utility. They're very easy to learn too, with a really nice hero talent tree. So across the board, I love Protection Warrior, and it's really the saving grace of this class in my opinion. Once again, I will say that Warrior is looking very positive heading the new patch, considering they're not getting nerfed, and they're above average in all three specs. But yes, ladies and gentlemen, that is the breakdown of how each class got buffed or nerfed in 11.0.5, and whether they're looking to increase in overall strength or sadly stay neutral or decrease. Let me know how you feel about all this in the comment section below and what you think of your class updates. As always, until the very end, my name is Sky from the Comeback Kids. I'll see you all in the next one.
Yeah, nice video.
Hey, hope you enjoyed the video. Listen, if you guys enjoyed the content, we have a ton of other videos to help you get through the war within, like these two right here. And since you're already here, do us a favor and
I'll
hit that
summarize a
subscribe
little
button
bit
to
here
join
when
the
he stops.
Comeback Kids family today, because every subscriber matters. Thank you all so much for enjoying the video. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Yeah, overall winners, honestly, I think Mage is doing freaking amazing. Shaman, probably one of the best all-around specs to play, or classes to play right now. And then you got, like, what is it? Warlock's just doing, oh my god, shit. Druids are okay, but I thought they were going to get more buffs. Now, Feral did get buffed this morning, so that might help them out. But overall, I mean, if you just want to look at like who's king in terms of DPS and playability, I would say Death Knights are in a really good spot in all their specs. Mages are in a great spot. Shamans are in a great spot. And even you could even throw Paladins in there if you want to. But overall, those are the winners for sure.